Great. Well, thank you very much and welcome. I think we're now up to 40 people, so good attendance. Thank you very much for giving up your time to come and celebrate with us another year of achievements for the Cooperative College. Before we move into the more, shall we say, the more interesting parts, we just need to do the formality. Those of you who were here last year will remember that we forgot this, and I had my knuckles wrapped. We forgot to approve the minutes of the previous AGM. So you'll all have had those recirculated to you by email this morning in the final reminder. So if I could just check if anybody wishes to raise any concerns about the accuracy of the minutes of the last AGM, please do raise your hands now. And if not, then I will take those as an accurate record without any dissent. Thank you very much. So if we move on, I'll just quickly outline what we're going to do before I start. So I'm going to say a few words about the year of 2020 to 2021, and then I'll say a little bit about the end of year, because as is the way of AGMs, they take place a significant time after the period that we're actually formally reporting on. Those of you who were at our AGM last year will be pleased to note that we are closer to year end this time than we were last year with the COVID related delays. Very many, no, over a year after the year end, we're less this time, and we're hoping to reduce that further. So next year the AGM will be earlier again in the year, so we get closer to the time we're reporting on. But obviously that's a staged process. We can't just jump back a year in time in one lump. Then I'll hand over to Nina, our head of business development, who will present the formal accounts, and then we'll come back to me, and I'll want to talk a little bit about longer term trends, and then we'll hand over to Neil, our chief exec and principal, who will talk about the new strategy and our plans for the future. And then finally, in the formal business, we will have Craig from UK Engage to present the results of our trustee election, and then the remaining time we'll use for any questions that we're not able to address during the meeting. So without further ado, we're now at 44 people. I will talk a little bit about the year that we're reviewing, the year from August 2020 through to July 2021. It won't surprise anyone to know that, as with most organisations, that continued to be a heavily COVID affected time. And you'll remember, if you were at the last AGM, we talked about the agility of the college to shift a number of things online, but obviously many things were just not possible to move online. And so one of the most significant pieces of work we were working on at that time, which was completely paused, was the Cooperative University project, which was paused because the new Office for Students, the regulator that had given us the opportunity to explore the possibility of developing a new university, put a complete freeze on all new applications. Initially a temporary one, but that was extended, and so that project is now very much on a sort of semi-permanent pause, although we are, as I'll come on to, exploring a number of opportunities to work in partnership to deliver higher education level activity in cooperative education. Another area that really suffered from COVID was the travel restrictions. Obviously, was our international work, particularly that related to overseas visitors coming to the UK. But there were a number of areas where we were able to take things online, and we were very pleased to be able to continue to deliver some of our work with young people around the country online, and not completely freeze that work. So a lot of positive things in a year of much disruption, I think, is probably fair to say. The other thing to say is, obviously you'll be aware from the AGM last year that, coinciding with but not entirely because of the COVID crisis, we took a decision to do a strategic review, and what you'll see in the figures that Nina is presenting is the outcome of that right sizing exercise and the changes to be made to the college. the image that's on your screen at the moment is slightly cheekily from the after the year end, and I just wanted to say a little bit about things that have happened since the end of the formal period we're reporting on, because obviously we are now nearly a year past then. Just after, or just at the end of the year we're reporting on, we were pleased to appoint Neil, our current chief exec and principal, who was the final member of the new team who came into place following that right sizing exercise. And in the year since the one we're about to report on, a lot of work has been done to build on the new platform that was put in place by that exercise. And what's on screen here is an image from the promotion of our Spanner in the Works course, which is a partnership with Imperial College in London, which promotes it is a course introducing people to the cooperative movement and cooperative values, say the first of a number of higher education partnerships that we're very pleased to be delivering. That period also saw a return of international visitors to the UK, and also a return to some face-to-face training for UK members. So lots to look forward to, which we will formally report on in the next annual report. But I just wanted to flag some of that stuff now, just to give you a flavour of what we've been doing since the period we're about to formally discuss. So on that basis, I will now hand over to Nina, who will run you through the report and accounts for the 2020 to 2021 year.
Thank you, John, and welcome everyone. Before I start talking about the financial figures, I would just like to let everyone know that they can find our full annual report, including accounts, on our website. I will go through the key financial figures today, but first I would just like to put a little context around the accounts for the year end, 31st of July 2021. In 2020-2021 financial year, as John mentioned, the college saw a significant reduction in many of the most important income streams. Main reason for those was obviously the COVID-19 pandemic, which affected majority of businesses in the UK and around the world, but also the loss of core funding from the cooperative group that impacted the college's ability to cover a cost base which has been built up during a period with significantly higher income and had been maintained in anticipation of the commencement of the cooperative university. As John explained, the hopes of that development were dashed by the onset of the pandemic and the announcement that the Office for Students was withdrawing from processing any new degree awarding powers. It was against that financial picture that a weekly working group of senior managers and trustees began meeting from June 2020. With no apparent step change in income in the near future, it was concluded that the college could not afford to continue carrying the same level of costs. The main fixed costs that the college carried at that point was the investment in our staffing, and therefore a review of the structure and the working practices was key to reduce that cost base. In January 2021, following a period of consultations, a reduced management team and a 4-day working week were the main changes to be introduced, together with a reduction in office space as we moved to a greater home working. Annual savings in the region of 350,000 were identified at that point, although those savings are mostly reflected in this year's account, so in 2021-2022, which is the accounts we're going to be presenting in next year's AGM. You will see that some savings were made in the final quarter of the 2020-2021 financial year. So what you can see there is that the year to July 2021 saw the college record a deficit of just over 429,000, but that's included just over 228,000 restructuring costs, which is the line you can see on the darker color on the purple, indicated in purple. So even after those restructuring costs, as you can see on the graph there, we see a small improvement in college's deficit when compared to the year 2019-2020, which is the second line. The pandemic significantly reduced our ability to continue with some of our existing work. So as you can see in the next slide, that it's presenting our income by area of activity. We've seen a 26.7% reduction of our project income, and that was mostly due to the pandemic, especially in our overseas work, as we weren't able to continue with existing or further develop overseas work. So the income you can see in the projects for the year ending 2021 is just over 180.6k, which comprised around 112k from grants and service contracts, and then the remaining 69k is for donation for specific programs that we run. Of the total project income, you can see in the graph, UK programs remained the main source of income, purposefully due to the pandemic. So they brought in 140,000 income, and that was due to successfully being able to transfer those programs online. Our learning income, which is on the right-hand side, had fallen significantly in recent years. But a mixture of work postponed for 2020-2021 and some new business developed towards the end of 2021 has led to a much improved position with an income just over 113k as the highest level since 2015 for the college. On the right-hand side, you can also see that our investment continued to perform very well. In year ending 31st of July, we saw investment gains of 312,000, continuing a pattern of large gains that we have seen year on year. And finally, you can see that our balance sheet remains strong, with nearly 2.5 million of net assets, largely invested in Royal London Sustainable Diversified Fund. Although our balance sheet remains strong, recent years have been clearly challenging for the college, and the right-sizing exercise that Jon talked about was necessary to provide a cost base from which the college could achieve that break-even position. Although we recognize that there is still work to be done in order to grow income sufficiently to achieve that goal, there is a common sense of purpose and determination amongst the college staff and trustees. And our new strategy, which Neil will present later on today, will lead us towards an effective, impactful and sustainable cooperative college. Thank you very much for your attention. I will now hand back to the chair, who will expand a little bit more about the long-term trends and the path towards that break-even position. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nina. What you can see here is is the college performance going back as far as 2011. So it's obviously slightly easier if I was doing this in a room and I could point at things, but hopefully I can describe and people will be able to understand what the key information in this graph. If we look at 2012, you'll see that's the highest point on the graph there. 2012 and 2013 are the final years of the college doing a significant amount of work with cooperative schools. That was actually the period of the transfer of cooperative trust schools into cooperative academies, where the college did a lot of work supporting cooperative schools. Obviously, with that funding ending, both the income and the expenditure of the college declined in 2014. You'll also note that those 2 years were the only years where the college came close to a break-even sustainable position in the last decade. And what you'll see as Nina was talking about is that we in 2015, the point where the college became an independent charity in its new structure, from 2015 through to 2019, there's a relatively stable income. But what there isn't is a sustainable cost base. The cost base from the previous level of operation was retained, and there were a number of initiatives over those years to try and bring the income back up to justify, to enable us to continue with that level of resourcing. And as we've both said, by 2020 and the start of the pandemic, it was obvious that we couldn't continue to in that mode, needed to take some action. And what you'll see very clearly here is that from 2019, both the 2020 and 2021 income figures drop off dramatically, and that's a combination of factors. Most obviously, there's the pandemic impact, but I think it's also worth noting that we as trustees had put quite a lot of resource into two major projects in 2019, 2020. One, the Co-operative University, which we've mentioned, and the other was the Centenary Conference in Rochdale, which I hope many of you were able to attend and enjoy. The plan that we had at that point was that the Co-operative University would, after a number of years of set up an investment, would develop and become a major income stream for the college. And also the Centenary Conference was a key event for building networks and promoting future activity, both here and abroad. Obviously, as we've said, the pandemic had a major impact on those, but also because of the focus on those two key projects, with hindsight, it's always easy with hindsight to say that perhaps too little attention was given to pipeline in other areas of income that might have given us options that, when those two key areas didn't pan out as we'd hoped. Obviously, as I say, it's easy with hindsight to say that, but we wanted to be completely transparent with members about where we are. Where I think there is hope from what is, on the face of it, quite a negative graph, is if you look at the relatively flat line in the middle, or the lower line of the income, which is the college's income since it became a charity in 2015 through to 2019. That's a relatively stable income of around £1 million. And if you look at the total expenditure post the right sizing exercise, the figures for the year we're currently in and the budget for next year, that is a figure slightly below £1 million. The challenge we face, and what Neil will talk about, the strategy we have for starting to address that, is ensuring that the income returns to that £1 million level that we had for that period prior to the pandemic, and that we achieve a position where the college has a sustainable basis on which to build going forward. So whilst this is not an overly positive graph, I think it does have the signs of hope in it, and we as trustees are confident that the right sizing exercise, combined with the new strategy that I'm going to hand over to Neil to talk about, will lead to a situation where the college has a sustainable platform from which to build. And we're incredibly grateful to all of the partners, many of whom are in the room, for their continued support of the college and the business that you put our way. I think at that point, I will stop talking about the long term and or the history, sorry, the long-term trends in history, and hand over to Neil to talk about the future plans.
Thanks very much, John, and a welcome also from me to everybody who's been able to join us today. And it's great to see so many people. I think we're now up to 49 attendees, 50 in fact as I speak, which is great, and certainly an increase on the number that we had this time last year. So I reflected this morning that today is actually the eve of my 1-year anniversary of working at the college. I started on the 1st of July last year. So it seems an appropriate date, really, and it's a real pleasure to be able to present to you the results of the work that we've done on our strategy for the next 3 years. So what I really should start by saying is that lots of people have contributed to this. There is quite a detailed document which we will be making available to you. You'll be glad to know I'm not going to read it all to you today. I could talk about it till the cows come home, but what I'd like to do is to try and pick out some of the key points really for you. And I should also recognise a significant number of people have contributed to this. So it's an opportunity to say thanks to all those members of staff who've done so, but also particularly to trustees who've given lots of feedback and help with various iterations of it, and also to members who have given us feedback on it during the process as well. I would say, though, that I recognise that over the last year, we haven't perhaps been as outward facing as we'd like to be, and we recognise that. There has been a lot of internal focused and internal facing work for us to do over the last 12 months, but we recognise that the outward facing side of things, particularly in respect of members, is a target for us as we move forward from what I hope is now a positive point in our development. And what I'm hoping I can do today is show you a strategy which recognises and articulates who we are, a question that I couldn't answer 12 months and a day ago, I don't think, what we're for. So the purpose of the college in 2022 and looking forward, and also recognises and articulates to some extent where we've come from too. But importantly, looks ahead with an eye towards what our strengths are now as the organisation that we are now, where there's a need and a demand for what we can do, and where there are opportunities out there which will help us to continue that process of moving towards financial sustainability, which obviously Nina and Jon have both already talked about to some extent. So my first slide just has 4 words, but as you'd expect, anybody who's been involved in putting a strategy together, they're 4 words that have been quite carefully chosen. And it's really important to explain that we do recognise our role as being one to facilitate. We believe that education is done with and not to learners. The prepositions are quite important to us, and we've spent a lot of time discussing them. We do recognise, and some of you may have read the interview that I did with Co-op News around the turn of the year, where I talked about this in a bit more detail. We do recognise that in a lot of the work we do, we're not always the experts in the room, not always the experts certainly on the content. We recognise that we often work with really experienced co-operators. Where we do expect to be able to bring our expertise and our experience is in learning and teaching. And then looking again at the words fostering growth, again, very carefully chosen, recognising that on the one hand, we have a responsibility and an opportunity to contribute to the success of organisations, but also in other strands of our work, a role to play in personal development as well. So it perhaps doesn't trip off the tongue immediately, but I hope that those 4 words, which people have spent so much, or we've spent so much time choosing, will become quite ubiquitous and we'll live up to them as well. So what are we looking to achieve over the next 3 years? And I should say we effectively work on academic years. So we see 2022 as being just about to start rather than being halfway through. 3 things. The first of which I think is really important in terms of me really articulating the fact that when I arrived, it became clear fairly early that one of our biggest challenges was quality. And it's not that the work that the college did wasn't of quality, but what we needed to do was reassure our members and our clients and our friends that what we do is consistently of a high quality. And where I want us to be is where, you know, this phrase, become the learning partner of choice, means I want the people who work with the college to have chosen us because we are the best. We can provide the best quality at whatever it is they want to do with us. Not choose us because they've always gone to the college, they feel they ought to go to the college, they've got a responsibility to do it. But we want to become the learning partner that organisations and individuals choose because of the quality of what we do, not to them, but with them. Second point here, which is the kind of pinky circle, I'm going to refer to a couple more times, but it is clear to us that we need to have a distinctive learning approach. And again, you may have seen some of this in the article in Co-op News, but we believe in a learning approach that puts the learner at the centre and effectively doesn't do what I'm doing to you now, which is reading from a slide. There is a time and a place for doing this, and an AGM probably is one, but our learning approach that we want to be known for and respected for is one where the learner is at the centre. And then finally, in the greener circle, an important recognition of our size and capacity, and a recognition that we are at our very best when we work in partnerships, and when, you know, we are genuinely cooperating with others, individuals and organisations. So this is where we're looking to be by the end of the strategy. We hope we're some part of the way there already. I'm not going to spend too long on this slide because I'm not sure there are any surprises here. I've talked previously about where we see our purpose being now, and obviously those values will be extremely familiar to all of you. Our next two slides are also a little bit more inward looking, and I don't want to spend a great deal of time on this one. This is really about how we organise ourselves internally. But what I would say for those of you that are quite close to the college and close to some of the staff is our internal organisation will no longer be divided into what have been referred to me as at times as silos of learning and projects. So everything we do is learning. So although we still have a learning team, actually every member of the college staff has a responsibility for learning. And what you will see us doing, although I'll lapse back into it at times, is moving away from using the term projects. We understand why it's been used in the past, but you will see us talking much more about the purpose of what we're doing rather than the way that it's packaged or the way that it's delivered. And again, this is perhaps organisational, but important just to spend a little bit more time on, because one of the questions that people that I know asked me when they knew I'd taken up this job and didn't quite know who I was working for was, what is it that you actually teach? And because people were asking me that question, I then asked it internally, and it might come as not much of a surprise to know that we didn't have a ready answer to that question. And any learning organisation needs to be really clear on what its curriculum is and what its curriculum is for. So our view moving forward is that everything that we do will fall into one or more of these curriculum areas. The first two probably speak for themselves, so cooperative leadership and cooperative values and behaviours. The third, the language will be familiar, of course, from Principle 7, but just to add a little bit of meat to the bones here, we see that concept of concern for community as being quite a broad, wide-ranging category that subsumes a number of things, including some of the work we're already doing around environmental sustainability, but also that broad area of equality, diversity and inclusion. And I'm aware that some of our organisational members in particular are keen to work with us on that, and that's a conversation that we would like to take forward and to take forward quite quickly. So those are certainly the curriculum areas that we see ourselves working in. And as I say, that's a pretty important decision and distinction for any learning organisation. So now to some of the detail and to hopefully give you some examples of, you know, precisely what it is that we're planning to do. So there are 11 of these, and I will talk a little bit about each of them. The first, I'm coming back to this idea of a distinctive approach. And those of you that have been involved in learning with the college or at the college or alongside the college over the last 12 months, I hope can already recognise this idea of a distinctive learning approach with the learner at the centre. Many of you will know Ali Longdon and Amanda Benson in our learning team, but also we've been joined in the last couple of weeks as well by Stacey Salt. And that team now has a real wealth and breadth of expertise and experience in pedagogy. There will still be a place at times for self-paced online learning, and we do see that as a space in which we'll continue to operate. But our distinctive approach that you will, if you don't already, you will get to know us for, is one in which learning is facilitated, co-constructed, and genuinely cooperative. We also do, again, recognise our own capacity, our own size, and the needs of our clients. So there is a balance for us to be struck between, on the one hand, having a very rigid, fixed, off-the-shelf learning offer, which would be a take it or leave it approach, and on the other hand, being able to build a solution from scratch, entirely from scratch for an organisation that wants to work with us. And it is our view that we need to steer a course between the two. So it will become clearer over time as to what our learning offer is, and hopefully those curriculum areas will make that a little bit clearer. But it's also our view that any learning offer we do provide, then we'll have the opportunity for us to tailor that for particular clients and tweak it to their needs. So that flexibility, particularly for an organisation the size of ours, we have 13 employees now. The college now operates, as you'll know, a 4-day week. So there are some limits on our capacity and a very careful course to be plotted between those two extremes. So we continue to be sufficiently flexible. Talked a little bit about partnerships. I just want to go into a tiny bit more detail on this. So as John's already mentioned, during the year that's just about to finish, so not the year we're reporting on, we've launched our partnership with Imperial College London. Now, this is quite significant in the sense that I hope it indicates the kind of partners that we are looking to work with. We're looking to work with significant, big hitters who can bring something really important to the partnership, but also will recognise the distinctive elements that we can bring to a partnership too. We've now had 2 cohorts of the programme with Imperial College London. We hope to run the Spanner in the Works course again in the autumn for anybody who hasn't done it yet, and we've had rave reviews from the first 2 cohorts, but there are also plans to develop further programmes with Imperial. And just to be clear, this is adult and community education. It's really for anyone who has an interest and either has anything from 0 to 100% experience of the cooperative movement. And again, it's using this distinctive learning approach so learners can also bring their own expertise to that too. So that's the first of these partnerships. However, I'm going to use today to tell you about the next one, and this is the first time we've gone public on this. We're also in fairly advanced stages of conversations with the University of Dundee. And this is about developing and co-delivering master's level modules of learning in a range of cooperative topics that will be able to be either studied as a standalone pathway, giving a master's level certificate, or as part of a full master's qualification with the University of Dundee, delivered in a flexible hybrid way. So it doesn't matter whether you live in and around Dundee or you live on the opposite side of the planet or elsewhere in the UK. And we are hopeful. It's not signed and sealed yet, but Dundee have approved us going live with this today and letting you know as our members. It is hopeful that this is something that we may be launching, ready to start teaching in the autumn of 2023. There is a lot of work to be done before then, but it's a significant partnership and hopefully a sign of the kind of partnerships and the kind of work that we are looking to do. And then finally on this point, and this actually will be news even to my colleagues who are on the call today, but yesterday we secured an agreement with the British Library to provide digital access to oral histories of the cooperative movement, which were collated, we believe, in the early 1990s and have actually existed on some cassette tapes, which have been gradually degrading, and although they have been kept in the British Library, so they're in a reasonable state, but are at risk of being lost because of the physical media they're stored on. And we have now reached an agreement where those will be digitised and access will be provided through the British Library, but also via the college to our learners and our members as well. So hopefully a really powerful resource of primary source material that hasn't been accessed for around 30 years. And we hope to be making that available to you and to other friends of the college very soon. Okay, moving on. You'll of course understand that over the last 2 years, the college was forced in many ways into changing lots of what it already does. And Jon and Nina have already alluded to this, that there was a need to move some face-to-face things into online provision very, very quickly because of the pandemic. Things are now changing again, and we see the future being blended. We see the future being hybrid. We see the future being one where there is face-to-face learning and there is online learning. But actually, the most important thing to us is that the future will be one where the learning is innovative and the learning is delivered in a way that provides the most compelling and powerful learning experiences. Now, this is a challenging space. I wouldn't say that at the moment the college could describe itself as innovative in everything that it does, but it's a direction in which we want to move. And I hope you'll see evidence of that, and also that some of you may well be able to contribute to that and help us. Moving on and conscious of time, so I'll speed up a little bit. We do see that it's still the role of the college to be involved in research. It's unlikely that we'll carry out research purely on our own in the short term, but we see ourselves as a medium for allowing others to communicate their research more widely through our networks, as we did with ICA research into co-ops and environmental sustainability last autumn. But we'll also still be partaking in research in partnerships, and hopefully in the next couple of months we'll be able to go public on a partnership with another leading UK university, not one of the ones I've mentioned already, around a fairly significant piece of research about cooperative systems overseas. So more news of that to follow soon, I hope. We do see a responsibility for ourselves as an advocate for supporting cooperative learners elsewhere around the world. And those of you that follow our social media and social media that we follow from other organisations will have seen that in the last couple of weeks, we signed at the ICA Congress in Seville a partnership agreement with the brand new Cooperative College of the Philippines, which will involve us in supporting that organisation and getting off the ground. We're also in similar conversations with an organisation in Lagos State, Nigeria. We do see a role in supporting cooperative educators elsewhere, but of course in mutually supportive partnerships where we expect that we will learn at least as much, if not more, as our partners will learn from us. So an area that we see important to us moving forward. There's a long history of the college working to support the development of co-ops in the Global South. The timing of today is almost perfect. We're out by about 48 hours in that by Saturday, you will hopefully via our normal networks see the launch of a major new project to support the development of co-ops elsewhere in Africa, supported by a large UK retail society. I don't feel I can say too much more at this point without stealing that thunder. Number 8's a bit more internal, but we recognise we need to get better and more consistent at evaluating what we do, helping us to improve, but also helping us to demonstrate impact to future funders. I've talked a little bit about the fact that we don't talk about projects anymore. However, we seem to have used it on this slide, but our UK youth programmes you will be familiar with, I'm sure. Many of you will know about our Youth Cooperative Action and our Cooperative Adventure programmes, working with young people in disadvantaged communities. We've already begun work to tailor and tweak these programmes so actually they become more suited to the particular needs of specific groups of disadvantaged young people, in particular young people with autism, but also a completely different group, young people who are potentially at risk of involvement with the criminal justice system. So it is our view that the programmes that already run very successfully can be tailored and tweaked to make them even more suited to the needs of these particular groups. And just concluding my 11 points, so we're nearly there. This follows on very nicely from the previous point. So while we're keen to work with disadvantaged young people and communities, we're keen to do it in cooperation with co-ops that are already there on the ground and share the same commitment to those communities. A great example is that we will be running a YCA, Youth Cooperative Action Programme in Lowestoft, starting this autumn, and actually funded by Central England Co-op, who will be working as our partner there, so we can each support that specific community. And then last but certainly not least, it's important to have a focus on our people. It's an opportunity for me to talk briefly about our staff. It has been a challenging time for our staff over the last couple of years. Like every organisation, it has been difficult dealing with the challenges of the pandemic. You've heard also about some of the other challenges the college has had as well over that period. And I just want to take this opportunity to pay tribute to our fantastic staff. As I say, I've been with them for very nearly a year, and I'm not sure I've worked with a group of people who are consistently quite so committed and skilled as this group. So making sure that we continue to be an employer of choice and we can recruit and retain the best people is really important to us. But this isn't just about our staff. And as I mentioned earlier on, we recognise a need to be more outward facing and engage more effectively with our members. So I did warn you I could wax lyrical for a long time on this, and that's me being relatively brief, but we wanted to take the opportunity to share the broad brushstrokes of the strategy with you today, but also give you a little sort of insight into some of the detail and some of the specific work that is planned around that strategy. There will be a more detailed document available to you soon after today's meeting, and it isn't fixed. So although you've seen it and we've said it's final, clearly a strategy remains a living document. So contributions that members can make to that and advice you can give us and help you can give us will be hugely appreciated. So at that point, I think, John, I'm handing back to you. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you very much, Neil, and thanks for running us through that. As you say, some things that are news even to the most closely involved. So excellent to have all of that. What I'm going to do now is hand over to Craig Poyser from UK Engage to run us through the results of the trustee elections, and then we will move into the Q&A session for members. So Craig, if I can hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you, John. UK Engage were appointed to independently oversee the Board of Trustee voting process. This year, we received votes from 64 members, with each member having the choice to vote for up to 2 candidates. I can hereby confirm the results are as follows. Rosie Harvey received 27 votes. Chris Jardine received 32 votes. Adrienne Lowe received 20 votes. Gregory Roberts received 31 votes, and Grant Wollstonecroft received 10 votes. I can therefore declare that Chris Jardine and Gregory Roberts are duly elected. I will now pass back to John. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Craig, and congratulations to those elected. Commiserations to the others, and thank you very much all for putting yourselves forwards. It's always a positive and a negative at this point, because I want to celebrate the fact that we are a democratic member-led organisation, that we elect our board, but it's also sad to see such talented individuals narrowly miss out. But as we know, there are many ways to be involved in cooperatives and involved in the Cooperative College. So I look forward to working with all of those individuals in various capacities over the coming year. I would also at this point like to take the opportunity to express my thanks to trustees who are coming to the end of their term at this meeting. Hazel Johnson, who has been a trustee since before the college became a charity in 2015, was part of the transitional board, and has reached her term limit, and so unable to restand. So thank you very much, Hazel. I've certainly valued your experience and support in my time as chair, and also to say thank you to Vivian, who has served as the Co-ops UK rep on the college board, but has come to the end of his term on the Co-ops UK board, and so can't any longer be there rep on our board, and we look forward to welcoming a new colleague from Co-ops UK in the near future. At that point, I think we have concluded the formal business. So I do want to take the opportunity to take contributions and questions from members. There's not a lot in the chat at the moment that I can see, but do feel free to either put things in chat or raise your hand. But Nina, I think we have a couple of questions that were submitted in advance, possibly by members who weren't able to attend. So perhaps if we take one of those, and then I see Richard, you've got a hand.
Yeah, that's fine, John. One of the pre-submitted questions from one of our members was if the college still accept co-production and sharing of knowledge especially with college research and educational forums. So if one of you would like to answer that, I'm looking at Neil, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Nina. Yeah, very happy to pick that one up. I mean, I think co-production was probably one of the phrases that I used in describing our distinctive learning style, learning approach. So it is very much the case that, and I've also alluded to the fact that, you know, we see a significant focus of our work being working in partnerships as well. So, and also, I guess it picks up on three of the points really, because also talked about the fact that research isn't something we're likely to be doing on our own as the college, but is something that we're likely to be doing in conjunction with other organisations. So I think we see those partnerships where there's co-production of research and so forth, those partners potentially being individuals, being co-ops in the UK or elsewhere, and also potentially being educational institutions as well. So I think probably the short answer to the question, Nina, is yes.
Thanks, Neil. Richard.
Thank you, John. I've got a couple of questions. Very much welcome the presentation, and it's also refreshing to have some honesty about the challenges and the financial challenges the college faces in terms of framing looking to the future. My first question is about kind of competition, duplication and cooperation with other people within the co-op movement providing educational and learning services. I think for a lot of people in the movement, particularly people who are new to the movement, find it very confusing that Co-ops UK has courses it promotes and runs, the college has courses it promotes and runs, and the two don't seem to relate to each other very much. Now, clearly, the days are long gone when the college was a department of Co-ops UK and could be told what to do. But I think in the spirit of cooperation, your former or our former late chair came up with a very positive and I thought practical suggestion several years ago that if the people in the college and Co-ops UK who plan what courses are delivered, when and where and to whom, could sit down and work out, you know, where things overlap, where there are gaps, and then promote a coordinated programme of courses to the movement, it would be a lot easier for everybody's customers to understand externally, and how you sort out who actually delivers things and where the money goes internally is not something the customer needs to worry about. But to have some kind of co-branded, coordinated, agreed approach, which I think with the worker co-ops beginning to split away from Co-ops UK as well, I think the need for some kind of coherent offering is more important than ever. So that's one question. And the second question is, I think I raised this last year, have you thought anything more about having a more realistic corporate membership ask, particularly for some of the larger co-ops? Because for the last kind of 15 years or so, you've been asking large societies for an annual membership of £1,000 for the college, when they're quite happily paying, you know, 60,000 to the co-op party or over 100,000 to Co-ops UK. I understand that getting people to buy services is better than seeming to be holding out a begging bowl, but I think in a grown-up conversation, we all understand that there are core costs of running organisations which are difficult to recover through external project funding, and can only be managed down to a certain extent. And asking our key partners to share an equitable portion of those core costs would allow more education to be delivered to more co-operators and more members of the public. And I think it would be win-win. And you simply haven't asked. You know, when I was on the Central England Co-op board, I persuaded my colleagues to pay a voluntary additional subscription in the hope that others would step up and do likewise. But I think you've got to get better at asking.
Thank you very much, Richard. I think in terms of the first question, it's definitely something which both we and Co-ops UK are very aware of, and I know Neil may want to say a little bit more about it, but some work on exactly the kind of approach that you were talking about was done. As you'll also be aware, both organisations have been through quite a lot of change and the development of their own structures and strategies. So their cooperation between co-ops is always easier to say than it is to do, sadly. But the commitment remains, and there are definitely some ideas which we have been in discussion with, and say, unfortunately, some of those initial proposals weren't able to come to fruition, but that doesn't mean that we've stopped trying. And I think perhaps I hand over to Neil to talk about the corporate membership, but certainly that's something which, again, feeds very much into the new strategy and the approach that Neil was talking about. But Neil, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks, John. Just very briefly, because you covered both of those. I'm grateful for that. On the coordinated offer, I guess to some extent, I have to hold my hand up to that. But I'm conscious that 12 months ago, I hadn't really got a clue what any of the other organisations did. So it did take me a while, perhaps longer than I thought, to understand some of those interdependencies between organisations. I do take the point, though, completely. And what I would say is I think there are some green shoots. So so far, perhaps only in smaller areas, but we are now, for example, much more coordinated in the work we do in supporting requests from overseas co-operators. So we recently had a visit from a very senior member of the Apex body in India, and actually we coordinated a program which involved us and Co-ops UK and Cooperative Group, which actually went very well on the day and involved all three organisations. And similarly, we've worked much more closely in the last couple of months with Cooperative Heritage Trust as well, around that kind of work, where there's a sort of clear delineation between what we do, what they do, but in a coordinated way. So it remains a target. And on the corporate membership question, I mean, some members might think that was a planted question to somebody asking, can we pay more? It wasn't, but it's a serious point, and I do understand it. And I think we have a job to do to articulate what might be the benefits of that, because I completely understand your point about core costs, and that is a big challenge to us. We are keen to work with co-ops to support specific pieces of work, particularly some of our youth programs, but it is something that we need to look at, and I'm grateful for the question, certainly.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think what I'll do, given the time, is perhaps take questions now from the three people with their hands up, Gillian, Duncan and Ian, and then we'll come back on the three of them together. And I'm conscious there are also a number of questions in chat, some of which we're able to answer on email, but anything we don't get to, we certainly will. Gillian.
Hello. As a long-time employee of both the Cooperative College and then the Cooperative Heritage Trust, it's lovely to see such positive things being done. So I just thought I'd say that beforehand. And as anybody who knows me knows, I always tend to talk about history. And the oral history project that you talked about was indeed the beginning of the 1990s. And there is some magnificent stuff involved in there. In answer to Steve Graby's question about getting them transcribed, they were transcribed at the time. And there are transcriptions within the National Cooperative Archive in Manchester. So they can be used, but to be able to use the actual recordings is going to be magnificent. The National Cooperative Archive was involved in a project a few years ago, which did some more oral history recordings specifically for worker cooperatives. So don't forget that that sort of thing exists as well. And just looking forward, the college is in a brilliant position to identify people whose stories should be recorded. And with modern technology, it's actually quite simple to do. So I'd put a plea in for don't just stick with what you've already got. Make new recordings whenever you can, because once you've missed people, you've missed people. And those stories need to be around for future generations to use. So keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. That's, as Neil says in the chat, that's fascinating and useful background. Duncan.
Sorry, yes, I was just wondering, you have a big emphasis upon collaborative and as you the word yourself, cooperative learning. But what can you do to help people who are disabled and who are housebound, who nonetheless want to research topics and would contribute on their own in some way? Is there any way you can help such people?
Great question. Thank you very much. I'll take Ian's question and then I'll ask Neil to come back. Ian.
Okay, I'm hoping you can hear me okay.
Yep.
I was surprised to be alerted to an article on the Co-op group site, which referred to was written actually by the chief executive of the Co-op Foundation. And in that, he was dead keen to commission world-class learning on developing community cooperatives. Now, I'm a little bit skeptical about the capacity of the chief executive of the foundation to deliver that work. And I'm just wondering whether the college had been invited to be involved in that work, given that, you know, it just lost some funding from the group. It's a bit ironic that the foundation goes off on its own. On a more constructive note, I've recently been attending some rather brilliant educational courses that have been run online by the General Federation of Trade Unions, who are very interested in cooperation as part of their educational remit within the trade union movement. Now that seems to me to be a really rich theme that is worth looking to develop. And they've got a lovely premises out in Leicestershire that you know, a nice hotel and everything, so it can't be bad. And in terms of potential partners, the other one is CLASS, which is a trade union organisation that undertakes research in educational matters and sociological matters. And it seems to me that they might be, you know, useful partners. So, but I think it's worth chasing up the foundation and Nick Crofts particularly.
Thank you very much, Ian. And yes, I'm very much aware of the work of the General Federation, the Trade Union Federation. From my previous role at Withcraft Folk, they were very supportive and wanted to do collaborative work. I know they have a keen interest in the cooperative sector, so we can definitely look into exploring that further. Neil, did you want to come back on any of those?
Yeah, happy. Just briefly, as far as the foundation is concerned, I should just clarify the foundation is a major funder of our youth programs will be over the next 15 to 18 months. So there is a 6-figure sum that we've secured from the foundation for that. So certainly as a grant giving organisation that supports our work, we do have those relationships with the foundation. And, you know, if they're looking to commission other work and work that involves learning, then I have to be honest, I haven't seen that particular article, but yeah, our door is very much open to a conversation about that. You know, new initiatives for us to get involved in obviously need to be in keeping with our strategy. What you're describing does seem to be, and either need to be you know, funded by the commissioner or be able to generate the right amount of income commercially. So if that's the case, we'd definitely be interested in that. And, you know, I'm not familiar with having worked with the General Federation of Trade Unions. Jon clearly is. But again, you know, our door is open for those conversations. And we have some really interesting potential partnerships that we, you know, haven't been ready to talk about today. So the more the merrier. We won't be able to do them all, but we're always keen to have those conversations. Coming back to the previous question about helping disabled people to be involved in research. It's a challenging one. I think, you know, the work that you've heard discussed around oral history and digitizing, you know, I'm hopeful might be the start of a piece of work that we do where we actually provide accessibility to primary source material in a way that would allow more people to access that. And clearly, if they can access it digitally online, then it breaks down some of those barriers. I don't think, as I said earlier, we're a primary researching organisation in the medium term, but what we may be able to do is broker relationships, or at least conversations between individuals and some of the academic organisations we work with. That would be something we'd be interested in doing if we could, but it's clearly an area we need to think about a bit more, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for the questions and for the questions in the chat. I'm conscious that I've let us run over and people are having to leave to go to other meetings. So I'm, much as I'm sure we could talk for significantly longer, hopefully in future years we will be able to have face-to-face meetings that enable those chats over coffee that we so much miss in the Zoom world. There's one thing I saw in the chat, which was a very specific question and about when we expect to break even. As you'll have seen from the graph that we showed earlier, we are projecting two lines that look like they are going to cross. We haven't yet nailed a date to the mast and said this is our predicted date, because obviously all of these things are future projections. But we are confident that we are on track to achieving that, as I say, for the first time in over a decade. And whether that is within 1, 2, or 3 years is still a little uncertain. But as I say, we're launching this strategy now with that very clear intention, and we look forward to coming back in a year's time and giving you an update, and hopefully at that point being able to tell you either that we've achieved it or that we're in sight of that. So on that note, I will say thank you very much to colleagues who've prepared the event today. Thank you very much for attending, and thank you very much to my colleagues on the trustee board for their service over the past year. And as Neil said, look out for the exciting announcement over the weekend, and we will see you on the next Zoom or at the next event. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.